If you want to make a really good tech house drop, there are a bunch of nuanced things you need to know that professionals are doing all the time to make little changes within the track to stand out. These little tools, whether it's a kick rumble, bass automation, drum velocities, it'll continuously make you a better producer, and your songs will keep finding ways to be more interesting and just overall better produced. Now, I've been making music for 5 years, and when I learned about these things, literally everything changed for me. Bass lines got cooler, my drums got better, my kicks sounded more proper. So we're gonna go over a few things, starting with kicks and rumbles, then going into bass automation, and then drums and the cool little nuance things you can do to spice up your loops and really keep things interesting. First, we're gonna play this kick and bass section all by itself, and we're gonna go over a couple of the ways why the drums work the way they do, why the bass works the way they do, and what I'm doing with the kick. We're gonna start looping this, and I'm just gonna talk over a couple things. If I solo this kick group and I don't play the bass with it, and if you have headphones on, you can hear the rumble that's going on. Now this is the rumble track, if I just rename that. And now to get this rumble sound, you need to set up a new audio track, and you set the mixer here to in, and then you're gonna have to change this from exterior in to kick. And then it'll turn blue like this. And then as long as the output is going to the kick group, which goes to the kick and bass, etc., you will now, only when the kick is playing though, you'll get a rumble underneath. So when I mute it, it goes away. Turn it up. You're a little better like that. But it just kind of adds a support layer to the low end, and I know that's becoming more and more a popular thing to do lately, to fill out low end. All right, so this is our bass line here, and you'll hear a couple things going on, like the bass line's moving, there is some automation happening, and I'm going to show you what's happening there. So if we turn off this one, this is our mid bass. I should just rename that for now. So this is our sub bass, like the lowest of low end stuff we got going on. If I solo this, you'll notice these automations down here. So if I hit that plus button, I can shift this automation down and then select the other one. So this is our cutoff automation, raising, and then this is a decay macro. Now within Serum, this is what's happening with that decay automation, okay? So as we do that, it just changes the length of how quick the cutoff or closes back down, right? So if this is very short, that's going to be very plucky. But as you lengthen it, it just opens it up and changes the tone. So I kind of played around and figured out what automation worked for me in terms of like when to open it up and use it to add the groove. And on top of that, oops, this just slowly increases how far it goes over time, but it's not doing that much other than filling up this little low end here because we do have it EQ'd quite a bit. And we have another Pro Q here, just finishing it off. Didn't like that one to be that high there. But now if we pair that with the mid bass, you'll hear a few things going on, and this is a fun one to show you and talk about. So this is a very plucky bass, and if we just turn this macro off here, you'll see I have this delay parallel, or this parallel delay rack here. So if I play just the delay here, it's very wide, and it's getting sidechained from the original signal right here. And if you want to see how to set that up, I do have some TikToks. And then combined with the dry signal. Because if I turn this off, oops, now it's just that, right? And then pairing it with the macro here. So what this macro is doing, this macro is routed to the cutoff. So it should say cutoff, but it doesn't. So this is basically just pushing the cutoff up. So this note versus that note, right? Just the length of the high end coming through is a lot different. So like this is something, just play around with your sounds and automate them. Because when they play together, you get some cool stuff happening. all random. Like just figure out spots where the groove works, and then once you have maybe 2 bars or 4 bars, you can duplicate it. Like if I did this here, is this the same? Yeah, this is the same basically. And then I did that, but then I adjusted on this last one to go all the way up. So I hope that kind of makes sense, but something you can also do, depending on what style your bass line is, if it's more 16th note kind of vibes, you can slowly open it up like that, do things like that. That works too, right? More. See, just like all different cool like rhythms you can play with and figure out how they work and what it does to the groove and to accentuate all that stuff. Okay, so now adding in the drums. This is where a lot of the fun will happen here. This is a pretty good rhythm, pretty good groove, I think. We're gonna turn off the percussion and kind of work from the ground up and show you how I function and how I make these things happen. And these things, I mean, make a functional tech house drop. So what I'm doing here, I do have a single hi-hat in a MIDI channel, and I'm using this last 4th 16th hat as kind of a ghost note with the velocity down very low. So if you notice, I do have these different. So one's at 91, 101, 94, 89, and then this one's down at 19, very quiet, like it's just kind of being an accent note. But something to note here is the differing values in the velocities themselves. So if I just loop this section, one thing if you can do, if you come down here to the volume velocity number, you can really hear it accentuated. So you can barely hear that forward start of that accent note now. And if I bring this down to 0, everything kind of sounds the same, right? So 35 is the default that comes on Ableton, I'm pretty sure, and I would hang within this range all the time. But one thing you can do, and this would go for synths too that are mapped to the velocity, you can be adjusting your velocities, like seeing if they work, and then have this at 100% so you can really hear what's happening in terms of the changes you're making, and then dial in the subtlety over time. I hope that makes sense. Okay, just to make sure we have our proper hi-hats back. If you notice this section, all these little these hash dash lines, I just highlighted this section here, and then you hit Control L on your keyboard, which loops this bar over and over. So this is all that's playing. You can move this around, this does nothing other than visually change it. Okay, so now with that extra little hi-hat, that's just something to think about in terms of adding groove along with the velocity stuff. And at that point, I think you're further ahead than like 95% of producers who are just putting in a hi-hat in an audio file or even MIDI and not doing anything to make it different, you know? And then processing, we didn't do anything other than just do some low cut because we're supporting this hi-hat with this loop here. This is just a simple little top loop we grabbed probably on Loop Cloud, I think, to accent everything. If you notice, it has this note here. So that's kind of like a call, and this is kind of like a response, and it worked out very well with the loop. I'm not sure what the original loop looked like because I definitely cut it at some point. Top loops aren't cheating, just so you know. So that kind of accents that, and I'm not sure if I use this in the final version of the song. We're not going to worry about that for now, actually. We'll just delete it. Like the song's already out, and I don't think I used that part in the final project. Okay, so next we have our 16th hi-hats, which I'm breaking a key rule here, not averting this note. So we're going to improve that right now and tell you why this is important. So this is where the main hi-hat goes, right? Okay, so if we highlight this note and play it, it's really up to your own preference, but a lot of people will tell you to omit this note so the hi-hat has room to breathe. I did not do that. But if you also notice here again, I have the velocity differences. So this is the important one in terms of the rhythm. Look at that, you know? So this is the second 16th note, which gives it that push before the main hi-hat. And since it's such a thin hi-hat, I think it works to push that early note. If this was more of a heavy, hard closed hat, or even an open hat that you're running on 16th notes, it might be more suitable to have these lower and have this one and this one higher. So it's just up to personal preference. These down and then these up will give it more of a pumping feel. I guess it feels a little more consistent since your brains might trick you into thinking it's pumping. I digress. And then for processing on this specifically, I did cut out, and then I threw on this vocoder rack with a couple random LFOs going on. So this is something I covered in a TikTok, and I made a full rack about it, but I didn't do this specifically, what I'm doing here, which is grabbing an LFO on the random preset, and then I have the percentages down 28 to 37 because that's the range of where this release wheel is. And I have this mapped. So if I open up this, it has all these mapping options. So if you click one of these, you can map this to a certain parameter, and then you see that's happening. So I don't want that. But if I see here with this LFO, this is hooked up to this formant shift and this release, which the formant shift is doing like ever so slightly pitch changes to the white noise being added. I'll turn off this, so like I turned off the main signal here. And this second LFO is, the second LFO is a random module on 1/16th rates. So meaning it's doing random actions every 16th note, and that's getting routed to the rate of this LFO. So none of this is consistent ever, and it's changing throughout the track. The final version, if I were to render it again, it wouldn't be the same thing happening on this specific 16th hi-hat. So that's something like kind of cool and neat. You could resample it and loop it as audio, but I just chose it to be MIDI because it's adding a little bit of what I need here. Because it adds a little bit of that upper end that I wanted, and then I added a Haas delay, which just gives it a little more width on the vocoder. This auto pan is just spreading it out a little bit every half note, and then I just EQ'd it. So instead of that. All right, okay, so now we're gonna add our claps in, and the claps are very simple. For this track, I found one really good sample that I liked. And then here, just like I am with the hi-hats, I'm adding a clap as a rhythm, so I'm really emphasizing that fourth beat turnaround. And then here on bar 2, I have this reverse clap. So if you notice, it was a little in, and if I hold Control and Shift, I can click and drag this to get it wherever I want. And if you hold Alt, you get it a little more smooth. Reverse claps, they always sound nice. If you can find a spot to sprinkle one in, I would suggest it. Here I added an extra little clap to give it that little skip note, and then this is offbeat clap. Clap. So adding the percussion, I found this little tambourine loop, like a tambourine hi-hat drum loop. I cut out some of that stuff because it's a little bit dirty, and I felt the track just needed a little more support at this point. I usually can't help myself for adding cowbells, so I have this one and these few. So this first one is like the little early skip. I'm not like the biggest fan of what I did with this and like in the position I played, but I had a lot of fun playing around with it, like pitching it. So if I turn these off, this is what it sounds like on its own. We'll turn it up to 0. So this adds a little F sharp. Right, so this is basically like adding a synthesizer sample, like a piece of metal hitting a beam. That's what corpus does. And then I have another corpus with a plate tuned higher. So if I turn this, so that's what that's doing. It's adding that sound, but very little and very short. And then drum bus to make it a little harder. I have the drive on hard. I up the transients, which gives it more attack punch, I should say. And I have the drive out at 27% because it is a hardcore plugin and it will change the volume. And then I'm just kind of smashing it with a limiter for some reason. And then this other cowbell was all good as is. Love this cowbell. I probably could have low cut this here. That would have been nice. But alas. And those just add a little bit of subtlety. Something I do consistently with all my crash samples is add an echo to it. So instead of just the crash playing, I have a little echo going, so it lasts a little longer. Usually on a quarter note, if I put it up to 50% here, you hear it more so like that. I like it like that. On a low feedback, you can always make it go longer. Something like this you could automate for transitions and impacts, etc., instead of using a bunch of different crashes or crash samples or impact samples. Like I could drag this over here to where the buildup starts, automate the feedback to be higher, automate the dry wet to go up right here, and then bring everything back down to where it was over here. So now in the buildup, it would act like that, and then on the drop, kaboom. You know, I hope all that helps and makes a little bit of sense. If you have any questions about the stuff I went over, please feel free to leave a comment. I will get back to you as soon as I can. Sound like a voicemail. And if you like this kind of content, let me know. You know all the buttons to press. I'll be uploading more throughout the year along with some live DJ sets, so stick around. We'll see you at the next video.